Good morning, everybody. Okay, I can hear myself, so that means that you can hear me. Hope everybody had a nice evening. I got another day of cold fingertips. Ooh, good morning. Good morning, Miss Kendra. Good morning, Miss Kim. Miss Kathy. Miss Kathleen. Good morning, Miss Tina. Oh, good morning. It's like, what is it? 14 days till Christmas, say the 12th. So, yeah, 14, no, 13 days. Good morning. So we have, countdown is on to finishing up those final projects, or more, maybe starting more projects. This is the time of the year that I always find new ideas. I'm like, ooh, I can do this. I can do that. Ooh, I can do this. And then it's like, yeah, it's reality, Amy, reality. You don't have time. So it's like, okay, I got to try to remember this for next year. And then I file it away and forget where I filed it away to. So hopefully one day it'll get done. All right. Good morning. So today, this morning, we're going to talk about tile scenes. Okay, it's Machine Embroidery Saturday, second Saturday of the month. We are going to talk about embroidering tile scenes. So these are embroidery designs that each hooping is a square / rectangle that you then put all of them together after they're all embroidered, sew them together, and create another picture. So, good morning. Just gonna wait another minute here, and then we will. I'll get started with the nitty gritty and covering all of the things: types of tile scenes, stabilizer, the prep work, trimming, assembly. And then we have lots of choices for examples. So it's exciting. And then I have a few examples here for you to show you, a couple of them. So, all right, we're gonna get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is the types of tile scenes. Now, I know there are a lot of other brands and companies that do tile scenes. I'm specifically talking about the tile scenes that come from Embroidery Online and Scissor Tail Stitches. Okay, so these, I'm sure the information is going to relate to any company and the way, the technique that they use, but these are specifically towards that. So the first type is going to be what we call stitch blocks. That means that each one of these hoopings is just thread, background fabric with thread on top. Okay. What you're seeing here in this image is the night before Christmas tiling scene that was available in two colorways. We had the traditional multicolor, and then we had a grayscale. There's also on the one on the left, you see there is an optional border that is available as well. So they are just background fabric, and then the rest of the image is all just thread, okay? We also have tile scenes that feature blocks that are applique. Okay, so here you're looking at this Asian crane. So the purple and the beige, some of the black are all appliqued. So again, they're base fabrics that you then applique additional background fabric to, and then embroider as well. So just another kind of concept. Then we have a combination of stitching and applique. So we have this peacock tiling scene that you see here. We have some squares that feature just stitching. And then you have some squares that are also feature applique. So it can be a combination of techniques. We also have tile scenes that are assembled and put together using sashing. So for example, the sewing quilt here by Krista Hamrick that you're looking at is basically embroidered applique squares that are then assembled. They're all multi-sized, and that the technique is then for them to be assembled with sashing between them. They could be sewn directly together, but the instructions are written with the intent that you use a sashing piece. Then finally, we have the window pane technique. And this technique here that you're seeing on the Picturesque Peacock collection is what we would assemble the blocks together, and then we cover our seams with a satin ribbon, bias tape, something along that lines to give it the effect of looking through a glass window, okay? So we have a couple of things. Now, a couple of different types of window pane designs, and there are some designs that are digitized for window pane. And so, for example, this particular design here has been created with the idea that you're going to window pane it. It's not been digitized for you to not do the window pane, if that makes sense. So if you left that tape, bias tape off, things may not exactly 100% match, okay, because it wasn't digitized with the intent of it being, for example, sewn together like it is in this peacock. Now, this peacock tiling scene, yeah, you could easily take, if you wanted to turn it into a window pane, could easily take and cover up those seams with fusible ribbon, bias tape, things along that lines. But it doesn't work the other way. You can't take a window pane design tile scene and remove the window pane portion of it. I mean, you can. It may not be 100% matching, but it can be done. But just an idea. And then we have some projects that are smaller, quilt block type projects. So for example, this collection, the Modern Petals Tiling Scene, is designed for like pillows and coasters, table runners, things along that line. Small wall hangings could also be used for the Modern Petals. Okay, this one's really cool. I don't know where it's at. I have one around here. It's not the petal portion of it, but it's another option that's in the collection that we have 4 squares sewn together with just really modern looking. Okay. So when it comes to a tile scene, there is a couple of, really there's one stabilizer and one interfacing that we need for the project. One being heavyweight tearaway, okay? This stabilizer is going to easily support, okay, very stitch intense designs that you would be sewing onto cotton or woven fabrics. Has a very crisp texture, okay, it's going to give lots of support, okay, to your fabric, especially for some of the squares of a tile scene that can be hundreds of thousands of stitches, okay? And it tears easily because we don't want this to be left in the seam allowance portion of our design. Now, there's no way in some of the tiles are you going to be able to get it all out of the behind the stitching, but we want to be able to at least remove it from the seam allowance. Yes, Miss Joanne, it's the perfect place for someone who's just starting embroidery and may be afraid of their machine to stitch a tile scene. usually large oval piece of fabric, very easy to do, easy color stops, things along that lines. It's a perfect project for beginners to get started with and get comfortable with the concept of, you know, running out of bobbin thread and having to back up, thread breaks, how to hoop, how to just change thread colors, and so on and so forth. So it is really good for beginners. The other item that we need is a fusible woven interfacing. Okay, so this is a lightweight, all over fusible interfacing. Okay, designed to go, it's a woven fabric that we would iron to the wrong side of your embroidery base. Adds body to those fabrics, kind of acts like an additional piece of stabilizer without needing to use a piece of stabilizer. This is permanent. This stays part of your fabric forever. And it really makes a difference in helping prevent puckers and prevent excess shrinkage of your square. So that's going to be helpful, especially in a tile scene when we need things to kind of match and be where they need to be when they're done, so that when I put them up to the next tile, things will work together. So this is going to help you keep that from having excess shrinkage. So it's not something that we use alone. It needs to be used in combination with another stabilizer, whether it's a cutaway or a tearaway, but it is necessary. It comes in white or black. So if you are stitching a tile scene on dark fabric, you may want to opt for the black fusible woven versus the white fusible woven. Okay, that would go on the back of your fabric. Now, here's how a tile scene is embroidered. First, we're going to apply fusible woven to the wrong side of the embroidery background. Okay, so you can cut your background into hoop sizes. So you could take and cut your most of the tile scenes are designed for a 5x7 hoop field. I think usually the OESD instructions call for like a 10x13 rectangle, but I have a tip for that. Okay. Mom, if you're watching this, over on the lunch table is Mary Beth's basket. You'll bring me that piece of embroidered fabric that's laying on top. Thank you. Using Facebook to communicate to the other room. So you can cut your fabric into hoops. What'd you say? Okay. You can cut your fabric into hoops, into hoop sizes. Apply your fusible woven to the wrong side of your fabric. You're going to take 2 pieces of heavyweight tearaway, kind of 505 spray them together, and then 505 spray your fabric. So you want to kind of create a nice hoop sandwich and a fabric sandwich that stays together. It's going to help you when you get to hooping this item from sliding all over the place. Okay. Then you're going to take that fabric stabilizer sandwich and you're going to put it into the hoop. Okay. There's no need to make sure it's straight. There's no need to make sure that you're a matching center. As long as your fabric fills the hoop, you're going to be good, because the tile scenes give you a line to trim on, or trim used for trimming things to size. So it doesn't matter if your fabric ends up kind of crooked. Now, heavyweight tearaway is stiff. It is very stiff. And you add 2 layers to that really stiff. It can be really challenging to get it into your hoop, okay? So if getting those 2 layers, the interface fabric, into your hoop is a challenge, okay? One, a master hooper is going to help that, okay? So a master hooper is your base that your hoop clamps to, that you can use that to kind of push against. You mean this? Yes, thank you, Dad. You just said it right there. Or you can remove 1 layer of that heavyweight tearaway, okay? Hoop in your hoop, the 1 layer of heavyweight and your interface fabric, and then you would slide the second piece of heavyweight tearaway underneath the hoop once you get it on the machine. That's what we call floating a piece of stabilizer, okay? You don't want to float both pieces of stabilizer because that's really not then giving support to your fabric, but floating one of the two is fine, okay? Now, let me show you here what I do, okay? Let's move this out of the way. I don't cut fabric into the squares to fit into the size of my hoop. And the reason for that is when you do that, let's just pretend like this hoop here. So I've cut myself a 10 by 13. My design is only going to fit within here. So every hooping, I'm losing 2 or 3 inches of fabric that I'm going to trim off and throw away. It's not big enough to do anything with, right? So what I typically do is we cut a piece of fabric the height that we need it to be. So for example, this piece of fabric here is the height of our large oval hoop. Okay, I'm trying to see. Here we go. It's the height of our large oval hoop. I leave it as one full piece. Now we interfaced just a section of it here as we go. Okay, you could interface all of it, the full width of it if you wanted. I'm gonna hoop and I'm gonna embroider. I'm gonna unhoop and I'm gonna rehoop. And I just wanna make sure that when I rehoop that I'm leaving at least 1 inch or 2 between my previous design. You really only need about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, okay? And so this is plenty. And then I would rehoop this. And then I would do it again. I would come over here and I'd rehoop this. So you're using the previous hooping's excess for the second hooping's excess, if that makes sense. And then we just keep moving on down this row until this is all done. And so, you know, this would normally have been unusable. So for every hooping, you're saving 2 or 3 inches. By the time you finish that width of fabric, you've actually gained an extra hooping. Okay, so that's just one little thing. And yes, we do hoop with that particular piece of stabilizer. Okay, we 505 one piece of heavyweight tearaway to the fabric, hooped it, and then we slid underneath. That floating piece of stabilizer, Miss Dottie, will get caught in the first set of stitching and then it won't move anymore. You could 505 it to the underside of the hoop if you wanted, but to be honest, by the time it stitches the first color stop, it will be attached and it won't move anymore. Okay. So that's just one way to kind of help you save some fabric or gain a little bit of fabric by not cutting your pieces apart into hoop sizes. When we're embroidering a new sharp 7511 needle, okay, the thinner the needle, when you would think that when you start getting into thick and dense designs that we would need a bigger needle or a thicker needle to get through all of that thread and things like that. It actually kind of works the opposite. As a design gets denser, you're going to want to go towards a smaller needle so that it requires less puncture of the fabric, less stitching through your, cutting through your previous stitching and things along that line. So 7511 embroidery needle, sharp, whether it's regular or titanium, it's completely up to you. Remember, a titanium needle is gonna get you about 40 hours of embroidery on one needle, okay? Versus a regular embroidery needle, you're only gonna get maybe 1 to 2 hours on it, okay? Which means almost sometimes one tile block on a needle. So definitely opt more towards the titanium needles. Yes, they're a little more expensive, but you do get a longer life out of them, provided you don't break the needle. They're also, that titanium needle is also a little more heat resistant to heating up while it's stitching for long color stops and bending and things along that line. So it's helpful there. Oh, good. See, Tina's leaving them as strips, and she thinks it's easier to do than just to use use squares. So yeah, it's totally a good option. Okay, a couple of tips for you. The last color stop on a tile scene from OESD is going to be what we label as a seam or a cut line. This is the line that we use to trim the block to size with. And so on that color stop, you're going to want to change your bobbin thread to a bright contrast black color, hot pink. You're not going to see it. That's the seam line. It's going to get caught in your seam allowance, but it is going to be easier for you to be able to see it as a guide for trimming. Okay. Because if you use white and your other bobbin thread is white, it's going to be challenging to know which line is the straight line you should be trimming from. Your upper thread, you can match your background fabric, or you can use wash away thread. Okay. So using a wash away thread is nice because when you're seaming this block together and maybe you don't exactly get that stitch line or seam line made invisible, or you can just take a little bit of spray bottle, a little bit of water, and make the thread disappear. And you're not sitting there with a seam ripper trying to rip things out. So I personally would switch to wash away thread on top and a brightly colored bobbin. This is the perfect place to start using all of those random colored bobbins that you have left over from freestanding lace that you need to empty. Okay. So here's a picture, and that black thread that the blue arrow here is pointing to is your what we call seam stitch. This is the stitch that we are going to use to line up our 1/2 inch trim line to. Okay. Early tile scenes with OESD are going to tell you 1/4 inch, but I highly suggest that you trim all of your tile scenes to a 1/2 inch. Okay. So you're going to leave a 1/2 inch from that line out. You're going to trim the edge of your, the excess fabric off the edge of your block. This way you can have a little bit more fabric to kind of hold on to when you're trying to match and seam. Okay. It also, I think, helps to press open. It's easier to press open a 1/2 inch seam than it is to press open a 1/4 inch seam, which about 1/8 of that 1/4 inch seam has got stitching in it. Okay. To help you further be organized, write the number of the block on the back. Okay. On that white stabilizer, just take a pencil and write, you know, block 26 or block 2. I would also note the direction or the orientation for the top of the block. So whether it's an arrow pointing up or you write a T at the top, this will help you make sure that you don't accidentally sew a block upside down when you're assembling rows or assembling your seam. Okay. Nothing's worse than realizing after you've sewn the thing together that you've got something upside down. Okay, so here it is trimmed. This one, the images here again show a 1/4 inch seam, but I would highly suggest a 1/2 inch. Okay. And then some blocks, for example, like the quilts that have borders on them, you could easily put more than one in a hoop, as long as you leave 1/2 inch to a 1 inch distance between the designs or larger. So for example, these little cornerstones down here for the quilt, you could probably get 4 in a large oval hooping. Okay. And then you can just spread them apart. That'll help save fabric and stabilizer. When you're looking at tile scenes, nobody says you have to use the whole tile scene. So for example, this, what you're looking at here on the left is the full tile scene. And on the right is just a portion of the tile scene. So if you need a, like a table mat, a smaller wall hanging section, or really only like a particular portion, you want the barn or this particular peacock section, you can stitch just one portion of the design, a couple of blocks. You can stitch coasters, that type of thing. So nothing says you have to do the entire thing. Okay, so on to assembly. So when we're assembling these blocks, we're going to put them right sides together in the right direction. Let me go grab some caffeine so that I stop yawning. Or better yet, let me just breathe for a second. There we go. You're gonna put them right side together and we're gonna sew. If you've left a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you're gonna sew a 1/2 inch seam. But ultimately, you're using that stitch or seam line that was stitched in that brightly colored bobbin to guide you in the right direction or at the right seam. We actually want to stitch to the inside of that seam line. So if you look here on screen, that needle position is just to the inside of that placement line. Okay, so that is going to make sure or help you make sure that you get all of the seam line caught in the seam allowance to make it disappear. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to tear away all the stabilizer in the seam allowance. Okay. It's going to make it press easier. It's going to make it lay flatter if you get rid of that seam allowance stabilizer. And then we're going to press the seams open. So by using that 1/2 inch, it's easier to press open. Okay. You're going to want to use a pressing cloth on the underside or your perfect embroidery press cloth for just to lay your embroidery on top of, so that when you're pressing, you don't flatten out your embroidery. You're going to use steam, and I highly recommend a clapper. Okay, if you don't have a clapper, so a clapper is a nice piece of finished wood. Usually it kind of is in an oval-esque shape that we steam and then set the clapper on top of the newly steamed seam and you let it cool. Okay, because if you iron this and steam it, the moment you take your iron away and the item starts to cool, the seam comes back up to where it wants to naturally be. By using a clapper or something heavy on top of your steamed seam, while it cools, kind of draws out the heat and forces that position to now become the permanent position of those fabric fibers. Okay. Can also use a seam roller to kind of help get the seam initially opened or laying flat. So the seam rollers look like little wallpaper brayers. Okay. To help kind of get it flat so that you're not burning your fingers while you're trying to press that open with the tip of your iron. Okay. Once we sew in rows, then we sew rows together just like we sewed the blocks together. Okay, just longer sections of it. Okay, right sides together, making sure that we're stitching, one stitch to the inside of that stitch line that was embroidered for us. Okay. So this is another example, like if you only wanted that covered barn, you could just stitch one section of that. You wouldn't need the actual whole road and everything. So here you go. Aligning your seams and things, removing the stabilizer from the seam allowances, and then press those seams open. Once your item is assembled, you're going to layer it with backing and batting. Okay, and then you put your quilt top on top. The same principles of layering a quilt apply to this. So make sure your backing and batting are larger. Okay. Typically on a tile scene, we stitch in the ditch, okay? We give it something to hold onto the backing and batting. You could quilt it, free motion, grid quilt, do whatever you wanted. It's completely up to you, but if you're just wanting to get it secured to backing and batting, you just stitch in the ditch. You could use invisible thread. If you're really good with stitching in the ditch, you could just use a neutral colored thread, but I would probably go with leaning more towards an invisible, especially if you have to. Miss Jan, you wouldn't have to use batting. You could just put this directly onto backing because it does have stabilizer in it. That would be completely up to you whether you use batting or not. Okay. Now, we talked about there being window pane style. Window pane tile scenes get assembled a little bit differently, okay? So the way that the window pane works is that we trim right on the seam line, okay? So that last bit of line that we embroidered, that we would have normally used to trim a 1/2 inch away, we're actually going to cut on that line, okay? Because what we're then going to do is we're going to butt these up together and we're going to zigzag them together, because that zigzag is going to get covered with the window pane material. Okay, you just need a little zigzag, no wider than whatever ribbon or trim you're going to plan to stitch over top of it. But we're just going to put them right sides, lay them both right side up, butt them right next to each other and zigzag. Foot number 10, 10C or 10D for my Bernina owners would be perfect, because you can put the blade of the foot right in the seam, right in, or butt the two pieces right up to the blade of the foot, and then set up your narrow zigzag. Okay. Oops. So after your top is zigzagged completely together, you're gonna you can use ribbon, satin ribbon. You can make bias tape. You can use the pre-made bias tape that from Clover, like the fusible little 1 inch that we would use for stained glass. Put a little bit of fusible web on the back. So 1/4 inch wide fusible web tape, which is Steam-A-Seam tape, Wonder tape. What do we have? Wonder tape, Steam-A-Seam tape, Stitch Witchery, completely your choice. But we want something to fuse this in place, okay? So we can fuse it in place, covering up all of the seams. Now make sure that you work all the horizontal seams get fused, and then all the vertical seams get fused, or all vertical and all horizontal. So don't just lackadaisical, well, I'm going to do this seam, and then I'm going to do this seam, and then I'm going to go back and do this seam. You need to work all one direction first, and then come back and work all the other direction. Now, once your ribbons are fused in place, you have a choice of stitching them down, okay? So the image on the right, they are stitched down, top stitched on both sides of the ribbon. Or you can run a zigzag down the middle like shown on the right in thread color that matches your ribbon color, okay? So you want to get those to attach. And this is what I would, if I was going to quilt this, after I fused my ribbons on, I would layer it with backing and batting. And then I would use this stitching that I'm using to attach the ribbon as my quilting stitching, okay? Clappers will be in stock hopefully by the end of this week, okay? So just a little bit here, before I share some images, let me show you, let's look at a couple of things. So here is a block that's embroidered. The seam line you can't see because we've stitched it in black here on top so that it blends into this particular block. But on the back here, you can see that the block is, we've numbered it. So this is block number 32, and the top of the block is this, okay? Using this line of stitching, it has been trimmed a ½ inch away, and the seam allowance has been removed. The seam allowance has been cleared of all stabilizer, okay? Because what's gonna happen is I'm gonna take, and we're gonna put this, here's the next block. We're gonna put this right sides together, okay? And I'm gonna be stitching just to the inside of this line right here, okay? I will talk about framing in just 1 minute, Miss Kendra. I meant to pull a picture of Miss Melinda's framed piece. I know Miss Jan has a framed one as well. There are a couple of options, so I will talk about that. Miss Sharon has a couple of framed ones too. So we're gonna sew right to the inside of that line that's stitched there, and then we're gonna press that seam open. So you can see that some of your seams are going to have some stitching. So there is some stitching that goes into the seam allowances, okay? So that's what's there to help get things to match. The rest of the leaf is, or the rest of the pine is over here in this block, okay? So that overlap that you're seeing here is what helps us make sure that the image is going to match, okay? So here is 3 blocks that have been attached, and then this one I think is going to go this way and get attached as well. And then we repeat this process with the long rows. Okay. Long rows pressed open. Everything on the back is going to be pressed open. And then we have there is the top half of Merry and Bright. This particular tile scene has 2 colorways with it. So there's the red and green colorway that comes with this CD, and then there is a gold and silver colorway that comes with this collection. Okay. All right. So the question is framing. Okay. If you wanted to have these framed, there's a couple of ways that it can be done. You can back it, bat it, bind it, treat it like a quilt, and it can be framed like that. Okay. The binding on it is going to help keep the glass. I would put anti-glare glass in it. Is going to help to keep the glass raised off of the actual stitching. Okay. You can also have it framed without any batting and backing in it. And what I would do is, for example, let me go back to that picture. On the ones that would be my outer border, okay, once I had my unit together, I would put a piece of fabric or a border on this per se, using this so that the person who mounts it, that's the fabric that can be wrapped to the back of the mount and finish this edge. Okay. So you can either put a border on or just know which blocks are your outside blocks, and don't trim this section so that it's larger so that they can wrap and mount this. You can mount with glass. You could frame without glass, depending upon the look that you have going. I've seen it both ways. I think it just really kind of depends upon the look of the tile scene. I know that I've seen the Melinda's was done at Michael's. Miss Sharon's were done at Bernie's frame shop that used to be here in La Plata. She is now in Virginia, but still framing out of her home and that type of thing. So you want to make sure that whoever you choose to do your framing is someone that is trained, but is familiar with framing, needlework, that type, and they kind of have an understanding of how fabric works and embroidery and things along that lines. But I have seen them done bound with batting and backing, not bound, just with the embroidered top, with glass, without glass, with a mat, no mat. It's completely up to you. I'm gonna see if I can find, let me see if I can find Melinda's. I know she's got a picture in her Christmas stuff here. There it is. So let me change cameras again. So here is Oh Holy Night. It's matted behind glass in a frame. Okay. I don't believe it's bound or backed. I believe it was just flat. And Melinda or Diane, I'm sure, or Miss Sharon may even know if you can post in the comments. But that is matted and framed. And that one I believe was done at Michael's. So that is there. Okay. All right. Let's look at some other tile scenes before I show you some other physical examples. So Dashing Through the Snow is a window paned tile scene. Okay, so you can see it also has this border piece that's on it, completely optional. You could leave that border print off as well. But oh yes, for framing, make sure everything's acid free. Okay, in terms of the product. America the Beautiful from Krista Hamrick. This one's a small one. She also has a patriotic alphabet that matches. I love her stuff. Her stuff is individual embroidered squares that are then sewn together with like sashing and things along that lines. I love it. Her stuff, her artwork is one of my favorite. So this is America the Beautiful. This is To All a Good Night. This is a window pane collection, again, with or done with or without the border, completely up to you, depending upon how big you need it to be or want it to be. Here's another Krista Hamrick. I don't know why. It's not America the Beautiful. This is the nativity scene. I obviously forgot to, that are then pieced together with your pieces. Yes, I love, like Miss Jan says, I love her stuff. I love it. I love her artwork. I just love it. One day I'll have time to make them. But the Celestial tile scene. Okay, this tile scene uses organza. Okay, as an overlay to help get a little bit of the shine and sheen in it. So there is kind of help to get that stained glass look on it. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Krista Hamrick stuff is there's a lot of applique in her stuff as well. Perfect for all that little tiny scraps. Okay. Fishing with Grandpa. Okay. Standard applique and a combination of applique and embroidery tile scene. Okay. With or without the border. It's completely up to you. Dragon sky, okay, window pane. Good morning, Miss Melinda. We were talking about your tile scene. I just shared a picture. Did your mom quilt or bind that, or is it just framed just flat with the stabilizer and nothing else? You can educate me or remind me more than anything, because I know you've educated me already on it. But for the guys in your life, the white-tailed buck, again, just a embroidered squared tile scene with or without the border. Oops, back it up. This one's a small wall hanging. You could do a couple of them and put them together if you needed it to be longer. This is the poppies. There's also that poinsettia one that we saw earlier. In Starry Night Santa from Donna Gesslinger. We also have the Classic Reads books. So these are all book covers and book spines that you could use in a quilt, or you could put them all together into a small wall hanging like what you see here. The Enchanted Santa, which is this year's Donna Gesslinger tile scene. She does the most amazing artwork, we are in the process. This one is in the process of being stitched. We're waiting on more background fabric to arrive. We ran out. The manufacturer doesn't have any until next year. And I found a lovely store in Connecticut and a store owner, friend of mine, that sent me some, but apparently it's taking the long direction or the long road from Connecticut to Maryland because it is unforeseeably at the moment locatable with the U.S. Postal Service, but you know, nothing new there. So hopefully we'll get him done shortly. But the artwork and it's all thread. That's what absolutely amazes me. And I'll show you. I have a up close tile scene of Oh Holy Night here that you can see. Santa's Workshop. Again, this is a really good one that if you didn't want to do the whole tile scene and you just wanted Santa's face, you could just do like the first 5 rows from left to right and just get that image of Santa. This one is all grayscale. The only colorway it's available in is in the one that you're seeing here. And if you like your sanity, I would not try to figure out how to do this in a multicolor. Okay. Oh Holy Night, another Donna Gesslinger. I have one here to show you as well. And then we have Visions of, and there's one for each season. This was a very early OESD embroidery design. I think it first came out back when we first opened. So he's going on 18 years. It's designed, this was back when originally in tile scenes and digitizing were all designed to be done with the window pane look. So the concept of these 4 collections is looking out the window, the same window at different times of the year and what you see. Okay. Designed to be done in the window pane format. They are not designed to be continuous in terms of if you skipped the window painting, you will see like branches and stuff that just don't continue on into the next block. So definitely meant to be done in a window pane. Yes, Wendy, it is an original and I have them. I have 2 of them right here. I'm going to show everybody. Okay. All right, so let me show you just a couple more examples. Okay, so we got Mary and Bright. Here is, yes, these were classes. You remember Miss Laurie? I did teach these as a class back in the day. So this is Visions of Fall, okay? This is done, the blocks are butted together and zigzagged, and then I made bias, it's not really bias, I made bias tape, but it's not bias because we're not going around any curves. So we made a handle, but made it flat. So a strip of fabric, raw edges folded into the middle and then laid down on top. And then it is stitched on either side of the piece. And I used that attachment of the bias tape for my quilting. Okay. And then this one is Visions of Winter. Okay. Just so you can see, he's got a snowman down here in there. And then I don't have spring and summer. Obviously we got busy. And then here is Oh Holy Night. All thread. Only fabric in this collection is this blue background fabric. And the detail, it blows my mind that the detail. And in last year's tile scene, the Starry Night Santa, the way they make that reindeer look fuzzy. I mean, he looks like he has texture from a distance. It really is amazing. So this one was assembled, layered with backing and batting, and then everything was stitched in the ditch to hold together, and then it is bound. Okay, this one's going to be framed under glass. And so this binding will help keep the glass up off of this. This one will go along with, what's the other one Miss Sharon has framed? I can't think at the moment. I think it was the Starry Night Santa, I think is the other one that's framed from her. Okay. Do I have questions on tile scenes? They're really not difficult. Like I said, it's not multi-hooping. It's not anything terribly challenging. Yeah, the hardest part's going to be, you know, when you get to sewing the blocks together and trying to make sure that seams, especially if the blocks are a lot of stitching, they're stiff. Okay. But just take it. If you're, you know, if anything, baste the block together first. Check to see your placement, and and then, you know, if it looks good, then put it right back to right side, and then sew it with a regular seam. Okay, regular stitch length that's on it. The on Embroidery Online, all the tile scenes are in one location. So let me pull that up so that I can show you how to get there so that you can see that. They are all in one location. You don't have to search or anything along that lines. Maybe if the internet wants to cooperate with me here. Okay. Now, the quickest way to embroider online is to go to our website, and then you can just click on the big panel here that says Embroidery Online. It's going to take you right there. And then if you go to Embroidery Designs and then go to Techniques, and then scroll down a little bit, you will find a technique cube there that says Tiling Scenes. Okay, let's get to that. And then once you click on Tiling Scenes, you will, all of them will be in one place for you to use. Okay, this one's a really pretty one too. The moonlit, the background squares are pieced. Okay, so it looks like a pieced quilt that you then have, here we go, here's a bigger picture. A pieced quilt that you then have applique on top of. Okay, applique and embroidery. So thank you, Miss Gina. Okay, just make sure that you have Material Girls listed as your store. That way it's just like buying from us. Okay, so there's lots of them. This one is really cute too. This is a little rectangular. Okay, probably could almost make it like a bench pillow size. Leave that particular border off. You may need to add a couple of houses and a couple more night sky scenes, but a cute, or just using, this was just used the embroidery design. and pieced just Santa on a pillow as another option. Okay. Questions at all on tile scenes? Like I said, it's a great project for a beginner. It really is. Okay. You can just put fabric in the hoop and hit go. Okay. It's not overly get you comfortable using your machine and things like that. And since it's just flat fabric, it's pretty easy to do. All right, let me check the questions, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think I got all of it as they kind of came through. Yes. If you, let me show you what I did as well. In this, this type of tile scene, I actually used batting instead, and because it's being zigzagged together, I'm not sewing it with a seam allowance or anything. I actually embroidered through the batting. Okay. I used Battleizer, okay, that is been around for a few years. It is batting and stabilizer that have been mixed together, okay. We also have a new, Kimberbell has a new product called Project Batting, and it's the same concept. I sell Battleizer by the yard, and I have Kimberbell's Project Batting in packages, I think it's 3 yards at a time. Basically, by using that, I eliminated the need for another stabilizer. And then when they were done, they were zigzagged together. All I did was put the back on it. Okay, I didn't have to put another layer of batting. Okay, you just got to make sure that if you do embroider through the batting, that you remove it from the seam allowances. How long does it take to do a square? It's going to depend. You know, a square like what you see, you know, this square isn't going to take you but maybe 20 minutes. This square that's got a lot more embroidery and detail may take you, you know, an hour. Or this square that's like 100% thread and just very little fabric showing could take you 2 or 3 hours. A lot of them are longer running color stops, so it's something that can be running while you're working on another project type thing. But yes, definitely the images, the tile scenes that use like Santa and the Oh Holy Night and Santa's Workshop and are definitely more detail intensive in that aspect. And so they take, some of the tiles do take quite a few hours. No, you do not need stabilizer. Depends upon, well, no and yes. That is going to depend upon, do you need stabilizer if you use Battleizer? It's going to depend upon the design. With some of them, they are going to be much too dense to be able to get away with no stabilizer at all, but you may be able to get away with just one layer instead of needing 2. Okay. Don't forget, there are some tile scenes. The Merry and Bright tile scene, if you go looking for it, is under the scissor tail stitches sister site. Okay, so that Merry and Bright, if you go hunting for it on OESD, it's not going to be there. I do have Merry and Bright in stock in the store, so if you want a physical CD, we do have it in stock here in the store. I also have, I think, 1 or 2 copies of Enchanted Santa. And to find the scissor tail site, you can either find the header here on our front page, or you can arrow down to the bottom and always click either one of these to take you to the link to the sites quickly for you. Okay. Thank you, Miss Gina. I'll give you another job, Miss Gina. You know, be my moderator. All right. Yeah, so needing batting and stabilizer, it's, you know, it's going to depend. I would test it first to make sure that you don't need another piece of stabilizer, shrink too much, or alter in design. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. It's supposed to be another pretty day outside. And I look forward to seeing you either in the store today or sometime next week, or we'll see you next week right here when I teach you how to hand quilt by sewing machine. I've got some tricks up my sleeves for next Saturday. So we're going to learn how to use, at least on a Bernina, there may be, if you don't own a Bernina, you may have a stitch or a technique similar to that on your machine, but we'll talk about it all next week for Breakfast Club. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope that you have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Bye.